I needed to make a quick follow-up to that first part of the video because it kind of cut me off towards the end and I didn't get to actually summarize my points the way I'd meant to. I also missed a couple of suggestions that I wanted to make, so I might as well just make them right now. One of them is if you're dealing with, say, a murder investigation or another type of investigation, and you have a group of NPCs that you want the players to have as suspects, one thing I think is very helpful is to try to go online and find pictures that you think would match these suspects, or even just base the suspects off some cool pictures you find, and then have these that you can put out on the table so the players know that these are the prime suspects. That doesn't mean that other people aren't going to be able to provide information. In fact, I might even tell my other players, or my players, that other people may have clues for you as well, but these are the suspects. And now the players can actually see who's who, they can visualize who these people are, and they're not going to waste 30 minutes trying to talk to the cook, convinced that the cook was the culprit all along, when the cook's picture isn't even out on the table. If the victim was poisoned, they might still know that they should talk to the cook to find out if somebody else would have had access to the kitchen, but they're not going to, say, just murder the cook and call it a day. Another thing that I think is quite useful is using dice rolls, or I might even say not using dice rolls. If players need to find a crucial clue, like let's say, for example, there's a hidden passage behind the bookcase, and you took time to mention that there's a bookcase. The player says, I'm searching the room. I don't think there's anything wrong with asking them specifically, where are you searching? But if someone says, I look at the bookcase, or I try moving the bookcase, they need to find the secret passage if it's important. If it's not, if it's kind of an optional thing, then have them go ahead and roll. But if they require that information to solve the case, then I just have them find it if they search the right place. And I'll even deal with investigation rolls by letting them roll, and then no matter what it is, I'll just have it succeed. But how badly they roll might double or triple or quadruple the time it takes to search. In other words, let's say a player is searching through somebody's journal trying to find some relevant piece of information. They say that they're mostly just skimming through the journal looking for something that might stand out to them. So I have them make a roll. The player then rolls a 3. I tell them that they didn't find anything from skimming it, but they might have to do a more in-depth read. The player then decides that when they're camping for the night, that their character is going to spend some time reading through the journal, and I can either have them roll again or just give them the information that they were supposed to find the first time. I might even just say, it takes you 4 hours of reading, but you find this. Or if they were searching a room and they roll a 1 to find something of importance, maybe I tell them you spend 10 minutes searching the room and find nothing, but upon further inspection, you find this, but it takes you 45 minutes, for example. I only do this if the clue is absolutely vital for them to find. If it's one of many clues, for example, if I'm following the 3 clue rule from the Alexandrian, which is basically for every piece of information you want the players to find, have 3 clues leading them there. Essentially because they will probably miss 1 or 2 and could possibly misinterpret the 3rd one that they do find. So having these is basically just built-in backup plans to help get the players on track. So to summarize all of this, and hopefully not take too much longer since this video has already gone on long enough, number 1, limit the red herrings to only 1 per scenario or 2 per scenario. There's nothing wrong with having a twist ending, I don't think, but you don't want to be having so many twists that players start to lose track of what's happening, because then they just start tuning out and it just doesn't even matter to them anymore. They're just like, whatever, I just want this to be ended and done with. Number 2 would be prepare in advance, and that might mean knowing what spells the players have available. It might mean you understand those spells and how they work, as well as the limitations of those spells and how you can use those spells in the game to help the game be better. It also could mean that you might need a very well-defined timetable of where everybody is at certain times. I ran another mission it was actually the very first mission of the current campaign I'm running, which is a homebrew campaign in my own setting. The very first mission, the players were hired by this couple to basically be their bodyguards as they went around the festival grounds and partook in the spring festival. There was a huge storm that night, and so everybody, including the players, retired to the inn where the couple were staying. As it happened, there were a number of murders throughout the night, including one from the players as they were hired to murder somebody else. And one of the funnier things was that there were 3 bounty hunters actually masquerading as priests of the local death god. And one of the players kept taking all these dead bodies to the priests and giving it to them. And not wanting to blow their cover, they just kept taking all these bodies into their room. Of course, those 3 were later killed as well. And in the morning, there were a dozen dead bodies in this one room. It ended up being pretty funny, and the players didn't actually find some of the clues I'd left for them, but it didn't really matter. Things worked out quite well, and everyone had a good time. And the players didn't miss anything crucial either. They found most of the stuff they needed. But one of the things that helped keep that adventure on track was I had very detailed timelines. At 8:15 this happens, at 8:40 this happens, at 8:50 this happens, at 9:02 this happens. And I had notes on where all the major NPCs were at each given time, assuming that the players weren't changing things. If the players decided to talk with somebody at the bar, they might hold that NPC up, and now that NPC is at the bar. But for the most part, these changes were going to be fairly minor. And just like in the Ranger player solving Rowan being the murderer in the King in Yellow storyline, the detailed timeline ended up being one of the major clues that led him back to the Bard and kept him thinking, there's more here that we're missing. Timelines are both crucial for the Dungeon Master, and I would say they're one of the most crucial aspects for solving these types of mysteries as a player. If you look at every Agatha Christie type story ever, the detective usually manages to solve the case by putting together a timeline and figuring out where people were at what specific time. There's even books where, the detective walks a certain course to see how long it actually would take to walk from point A to point B. And if it takes 20 minutes, but the suspect said they were walking for 45 minutes, now you know that there's 25 minutes unaccounted for in which they could have committed the murder. I believe there was even one story I saw or read where a detective threw something into a river to mimic the body being thrown in at this one bridge, and then timed it to see how long it took to go downriver, so that when the body was found, he knew approximately how much earlier the person had been killed. Timelines are extremely vital, and I can't believe I didn't mention or stress this more in the first video. Point number 3, have a plan B. A backup plan is usually, for me, what happens if the players stall out and don't find what they're looking for. Like I said before, this could be that the murder victim decides, or the murderer goes after the players. It could mean that somebody else comes to the players with information. Maybe they were holding out for something and now they're being blackmailed and they come to the PCs for help. It could be anything like that to reignite the story and to keep things moving. Hopefully you don't have to use the backup plan. Ideally, the players will figure out the clues you gave them and things will proceed the way you originally intended. But that often doesn't happen. As they say in war, no plan survives contact with the enemy. And in your case, the players are hopefully not the enemy, but, they're kind of the enemy. Point number 4, don't nullify player choices. Like I said, don't just say that divination spells don't work for no reason. Maybe that's been built into your story. Maybe your chronicle had a divination god who was murdered by some other gods, and now your world has no divination magic. That could actually be kind of a cool aspect, especially if the players later find a way to restore the god of, divination and prophecy or whatever, and end up getting like some sort of boon from it. That could actually be a very interesting scenario. And now the fact that divination spells aren't working in your world is a core part of the entire cosmology. It's not just a convenience to stop players from using those types of spells. Same with things like Speak with Dead. Like I said, the victim could have their tongue cut out, for example, or their body could be disintegrated, or a number of other things that stop the players from being able to actually use Speak with Dead on the body. But that in itself can also be a clue for the players. Who would know to cut out the victim's tongue unless they were specifically trying to stop us from using Speak with Dead? Is the priest going to know this? Is the chambermaid going to know this? Or is the wizard, who is shady and up to no good possibly, most likely to know how the spell works? These kind of things can originally seem like a roadblock to players, but clever players can start to understand how this is actually a clue in and of itself. And another thing is, if the players solve it earlier or easier than you expected, just kind of roll with it. I know you probably put all this time and effort into planning your massive giant mystery and thinking that it was so cunning and so clever. And then if the players instantly solve it, you can feel like it just wasn't good enough, or that the players didn't work for it, or whatever. And I'm sure there's probably people watching this who think that I make it too easy on my players to figure this stuff out. And there's probably some measure of truth to that. But the point is, I want the players to figure out the mystery. I didn't spend all this time designing it just so that they could never ever solve it. If the players want to solve it, I want the players to solve it. And when I'm a player in those types of games, it becomes very frustrating when you feel like you're just beating your head against the wall over and over and over again, and you can't think of what the clues are. And some players might be willing to stick with it longer than others, but I've been in groups where it's literally just me, or me and one other person, who are still trying to solve the mystery, and everyone else has already tuned out because they just don't care anymore. And when I'm running a game and this happens, and it has happened to me as well, I kind of look at it as my own failing. And I'm not trying to blame other dungeon masters for this. I'm just saying that I personally think I probably didn't plan this well enough, or give them enough clues that the players were able to solve it. And sometimes you might think that you've made it way too easy, but I'd rather err on that side than making it too hard and having it just be a frustrating, annoying game that nobody enjoys, including me. So that's basically everything I wanted to talk about. Like I said, I meant to summarize all this at the end of the original video, but I forgot. So part 2 became necessary. Sorry. Feel free to hit the like button and subscribe and watch future videos. I'm going to do a bunch of other videos in different formats as well. Some of the class guides and player videos will hopefully have some skits to them. I'm waiting on some video editing software I bought. And also I'm probably going to have to buy some costumes, but that's alright. I think those videos should be a lot of fun. And we'll have a bunch of videos from the player perspective. I'm not really sure what my next video coming out is going to be, but it'll probably be released next week. For now, I'm planning on doing 1 video a week, maybe 2, but Thursdays or Fridays are probably the best day for me to try to upload stuff, because I have Wednesdays and Thursdays off. So that gives me time to make the video and try to figure out how to edit the video, which I'm terrible at. My hope is that my 2-year-old daughter will be able to pick this stuff up quite easily, and that I will just convince her that editing Daddy's videos is quality time together. That's the plan going forward. So hopefully you enjoyed it, and I will have another video next week. Thank you, and welcome to the dungeon. Bye.